So this video is the top 11 MLB Hall of Fame snubs, and talking about sports is kind of what does well on this channel, I guess. So that's what we'll dig into that. Okay, so number 11 is Pete Rose, and the main reason I included him on here is because people would probably get angry at me if I didn't. But more importantly, he is baseball's all-time hit leader with 4,256. And I think that regardless of whether he was a good person or not, or broke the rules or not, I think that baseball's all-time hit leader should be in the Hall of Fame. So either what has to happen is that baseball has to say, because you're ineligible, you're banned for life, we're going to take your record away from you and give it back, the hits record back to Ty Cobb, or they're going to have to just put him in the Hall of Fame. Now, they can't give the record back to Ty Cobb because that would be hypocritical, because that guy has all sorts of black marks on him as well. I mean, he's even alleged to have thrown a game for money in 1919. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I've never been a big Pete Rose fan. I mean, the whole Charlie Hustle thing, I mean, he seems kind of like a tryhard. He's a very overrated player, and if I'm gonna have, be a fan of a singles hitter, I'd prefer it to be a more exciting player who's, super fast or really good at defense, kind of like Ichiro Suzuki. But that being said, Pete was still good. I mean, there's no question. He's got a 79 career WAR, so he definitely, based on his skills alone, there's no question that he's a Hall of Famer. But of all the people on this list, I think he's probably the guy I would least want to be in, because he is a lifetime ban, so I don't think he should get in until after he's dead. But once he's passed away, I do think that he should be included into the Hall of Fame. So induct the player and the legend of Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, but the person I would rather not see in there. He's not a good human being. He's all sorts of personal issues I'm not going to get into. But unlike everyone else on the list, I do think he should have to wait till after he's dead in order to get in, but he should get in eventually. So number 10 on the list is Shoeless Joe Jackson. Now, whether he actually threw the 1919 World Series or not is kind of questionable. But in any case, he hit 375 with 12 RBIs, and he hit the only home run of this series. So if it's true that he wasn't giving 100%, at the very least he was giving 80 or 90%, 80 to 90%. And I think that should be enough. I mean, so in my opinion, I think he did well enough in the series to make it obvious he wasn't just making a mockery of the game. He was trying, at least at most parts. And he was just a dumb guy that got taken advantage of and then got handed too raw of a deal. I mean, he was made an example of. There's lots of other players that threw games, and even through the World Series, the 1918 Cubs have been accused of doing so. So, yeah, I mean, I think that to suspend him at the time maybe made sense, but it was 100 years ago, and he's long dead, so I think at this point, I think his lifetime ban should have expired at his death, and he should be in the Hall of Fame, but the reason that he's not going to is because if he does, that means that Pete Rose will also have to get in the Hall of Fame, because people will point out the hypocrisy, and really none of baseball's higher-ups or the Hall of Fame, they really want to deal with Pete Rose. They don't want him in there. So, unfortunately, I think Pete Rose is kind of the thing that's keeping Joe Jackson out of the Hall of Fame. I think that Jackson is more innocent than Rose, in my opinion, because I don't think that he really knew what he was doing, whereas I think Pete Rose 100% knew what he was doing. He was 100% responsible for his actions. Jackson, I think, is a more innocent case, and despite the fact that he was banned from baseball after 1920, he still accumulated 62 career WAR, and he's a 356 career hitter and has a 170 OPS plus. So he's unquestionably one of the great players of his time, and as he's grown to be a legend over the years with the various movies that have been made about him, I definitely would like to see him get inducted in the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, the Pete Rose situation makes that unlikely, but I don't think that that's fair. So number 9 is Roger Maris, and he won back-to-back MVPs in 1960 and 1961, but obviously he's most famous for hitting 61 home runs in 1961 while also playing 161 games. So a lot of 61s in there. He's still the American League single-season home run record leader. And I think that if we're ever going to let any of the steroid guys in the Hall of Fame who broke Babe Ruth's record, I think we should let the guy who broke it first, which is Roger Maris. I think he should be included in the Hall of Fame. Now, the reason he's not in is because his career stats just really aren't that good. He only hit 275 career home runs, so he didn't even get to 300. But, I mean, there's lots of people who are in the Hall of Fame for just, a famous World Series moment or a famous record of one kind or the other. And I think that he broke an extremely important record, and he was the first person to break one of Babe Ruth's records. So, given his historical contributions to the game and the fact that he won back-to-back MVPs, he was a key player on many Yankees World Series teams and Cardinals World Series teams. He absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. It's really silly that he isn't. His career WAR isn't very good, about 38.2. So that's a problem. But we're not. I would say that he's done enough as a historical player that he should be. It's a museum, and he should be included in that. He's part of the story of baseball. So number 8 is Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. There's no really point in separating them because it's basically the same story. Here you have two guys who are basically Hall of Famers. Like, actually, not even a question. Barry Bonds especially was guaranteed to be in the Hall of Fame before he took steroids. He had over 400 home runs and 400 stolen bases, the first player to ever do that. He had won 3 MVPs, and then he began taking them because he saw that Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were getting all the attention for breaking Roger Maris's home run record. So he began to do what they were doing because he was jealous of them. And, it was a mistake. I wouldn't condone steroids, but the fact is that baseball did nothing to punish him or anyone else taking them at the time. I mean, they just turned a blind eye, and the commissioner who oversaw that, Bud Selig, is in the Hall of Fame. So if Bud Selig can be in the Hall of Fame, I think that Barry Bonds should be as well. And not only that, he's really one of the best players in Major League Baseball history. Now, some would say that he might even be the best player ever. I would say that Babe Ruth is better, and I think that Mike Trout is also on track to pass up Barry Bonds, but even then, he's still the third best player of all time. I mean, you can't imagine another sport where, like, the third best player of all time was, banned because they were involved in some, scandal of some sort. I mean, Barry Bonds, he didn't kill anyone. I mean, he didn't commit an actual crime, unlike Pete Rose, who did actually commit a crime. So, I do think that Barry Bonds should be inducted. So, number 7 is Fred McGriff. And this one's especially ridiculous because the reason McGriff isn't in is because he only hit 493 home runs, which is actually the same total as Lou Gehrig. But they kept Fred McGriff out because he didn't get to 500. Now, he wasn't as good of a player as Lou Gehrig, but the reason that Lou Gehrig didn't get to 500 was because of things that were outside his control, right? And Fred McGriff also the same case because in 1994 there was the Major League Baseball strike, which prevented him from playing enough games to get to 500 home runs. If the strike hadn't happened, I mean, he was having a great season. He could have hit, 7 more home runs in the 50 or so games that he missed. He very likely would have finished with over 500 for his career. So I think that it's very obvious the right thing for him to do is to be included. Because, I mean, I think that 493 home runs should be enough. I mean, honestly, I think 470 should be enough to be included because they let Harold Baines in because he was basically one full season short of 3,000 hits, and I think that Fred McGriff is close enough to 500 home runs where they should round it up and let him in. I mean, it's not his fault that the baseball strike happened. Number 6 is Kenny Lofton. And this is one that's a little surprising because when I watched Kenny Lofton play, I never really thought that he was a Hall of Famer. I just thought that he was a really good leadoff man. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, he actually really should be in. I mean, for his career, he accumulated 68.3 WAR, which is, I definitely think that's at a Hall of Fame level. It's better than Ichiro, for example. Now, I'm not saying he's better than Ichiro because you remember Ichiro didn't start playing in the major leagues till he was 27. But Kenny Lofton, I think he really should be memorialized as like the last great, singles hitting leadoff man, because that's becoming more and more rare, and it's about to become obsolete. Another problem that Kenny Lofton has is that people basically think that he's Juan Pierre, given that they both had a similar career batting average and stolen base total. But if you look at on base percentage, Kenny Lofton's was around 372, and Juan Pierre was only at 343. So Kenny Lofton was significantly better at getting on base, and he also had doubles and triples power that Juan Pierre didn't have. Neither player had many home runs, but Kenny Lofton hit 130 to Juan Pierre's 18, and Kenny Lofton was significantly better on defense. It should also be noted that a better comparison for Kenny Lofton would be Tim Raines, who was just recently elected to the Hall of Fame. Number 5 is Gil Hodges. It really is amazing to me that this guy is not in the Hall of Fame. He's a legendary Brooklyn Dodgers player. He played on them for 2 World Series teams that they had, and he was also, of course, a member of the legendary 1962 Mets. He hit 370 career home runs, and he's the highest vote getter percentage-wise of anyone who didn't make the Hall of Fame. He got 62% of the vote, but has yet to be elected. So it really boggles my mind that he isn't in, and hopefully that happens sooner rather than later. Number 4, Dick Allen. Now, Dick Allen is a pretty cool guy. For one thing, he's a professional athlete who wears glasses, sometimes badass, in my opinion. He's also black, he won an MVP, he played for the White Sox, and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Pretty cool combination, if you ask me. Now, one thing about Allen that isn't really known is that he really is one of the greatest hitters all time in Major League history. His OPS plus sits at 156, which puts him in company with Willie Mays and Frank Thomas. Yes, those are the guys who had as good of an OPS plus as he did. It ranks 19th in all of Major League history. So when people talk about some of the greatest hitters who aren't in, it's usually guys like Albert Bell or Manny Ramirez, guys who were cheaters. Dick Allen, that's not the case for him. I don't see why this guy isn't in. His WAR is pretty solid at 58.5. He won an MVP award. He was a big name when he played, and hopefully he gets in pretty soon. Unfortunately, I think he's another victim of being a first baseman and not hitting 500 home runs, but I think hopefully that stigma ends because there's a lot of great hitters who did not get to the 500 number. Player number 3, Minnie Minoso. Now, from 1951 to 1960, Minnie Minoso had as many WAR as any player in the American League other than Mickey Mantle. He's one of the all-time great center fielders, and not only that, he helped integrate the game for Latinos. He was the first Cuban player to play for the White Sox, and many more have followed. He's one of the greatest players in White Sox history as well. I definitely believe that Minnie Minoso should be in the Hall of Fame, and the reason why he didn't have as high of a WAR as he could have is because he was prevented from playing several seasons due to his skin color. But once he got into the game, he was pretty darn good. Number 2 is Curt Schilling, who isn't in the Hall of Fame, mainly because of his political views. Now, I think that that's a pretty stupid reason for voters to keep him out, but that's what some writers have decided to do so far. He also isn't in because of his low win total, only getting 216 career wins. However, I think more people are beginning to realize that wins is not only kind of a stupid stat, but it's also much harder for a pitcher to accumulate wins today than they did 50 plus years ago. The fact is that 200 wins, I think, is beginning to be looked at in the way that 300 wins used to be for modern pitchers who pitch a lot less innings, they get yanked earlier, and they throw a lot harder. Now, Schilling, of course, is 79.7 WAR, which is, I think, one of the highest for players not in the Hall of Fame. And he also has over 3,000 strikeouts. So, really, based on his the caliber of his pitching, there's no reason why he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. Hopefully, he spends less time tweeting stupid stuff on Twitter, and I think he'll be in the Hall of Fame pretty shortly. And the number one player, who's the worst Hall of Fame snub, in my opinion, is Lou Whitaker. Now, Lou Whitaker has the 6th highest WAR of players not in the Hall of Fame. The players ahead of him are Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, steroid guys, a player from the 1800s, Curt Schilling, and Pete Rose. So while all those guys have various reasons why they're not in, Lou Whitaker really has no reason at all. He's an all-time great second baseman, and that's really the problem. The Hall of Fame just really isn't really too friendly towards second basemen, and they need to start letting more in. I think that him, Bobby Grich, and Jeff Kent are all guys that should be in who played second base. But really, I think Lou Whitaker is the worst snub because I think he was the best player of those 3 guys, all of who are very good and deserving of the Hall of Fame. Now, Lou Whitaker was also a member of the world champion 1984 Detroit Tigers, and he made 5 All-Star teams throughout his career. And he hit for 117 OPS plus while playing good defense. And he was a really good all-around player. And I think that he definitely deserves to be in Cooperstown pretty soon. Unfortunately, the Veterans Committee has failed him multiple times. So we don't know when, if ever, he's going to get in. And that sums it up.